All right, guys, we are going to do another mock draft. This time we are going to be drafting from the 10 spot. I figured that it would be best to go to the other side of the draft board. I already gave y'all a strategy going from the early on draft out of the 1 slot. I think that we are going to be looking at a completely different set of players now that we are near the back end. But as always, please, 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 if you are enjoying the content, if you enjoy fantasy football, make sure you drop a like and make sure you subscribe. Last stat I saw that I believe 35% of our viewers are actually subscribed to the channel. So whenever y'all subscribe, it really helps us out. And yeah, let's just get into the video. Let's start the draft. And this is going to be a PPR draft. And I'm not telling anyone in this draft room, but I believe when I'm picking out of the 10 spot, unless I see a player that falls to me, I'm going to be going 0 RB, and we are going to see how this team ends out. And right away, we see Saquon Barkley going before Christian McCaffrey at the 101. This is something that I think you will rarely ever see in your fantasy football draft, but if you do and you're sitting with the 102 pick, you better be happy. Here again, we see Clyde Edwards-Helaire go ahead of Michael Thomas and Dalvin Cook. I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire in Dynasty fantasy football, but in redraft, I think at the 105, I would much rather have a Michael Thomas or a Dalvin Cook. Now here at the 110, if we see Dalvin Cook fall to us, I think I'm going to have to pivot and I'm going to have to go with a running back despite the holdout concerns. If not, I'm going to be slamming wide receiver here, preferably Davante Adams. We see Dalvin Cook go, and now I'm really hoping we have Davante Adams fall to us. The last thing I want is to be having to pick a Miles Sanders here at the 110 with his week-to-week hamstring injury, but we will see what happens here at the 109. Davante Adams goes, and now I am looking between Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, and Julio Jones. And you know what? In a real league, I may lean with Josh Jacobs here or Miles Sanders, depending on what I felt with the hamstring strain. But we are going to test something out. This is a mock draft, and let's just look at what a 0 RB start will bring us. And I want to give y'all a good understanding on how we build a 0 RB team, especially in the later rounds, because that is where you will find your success. So we take Julio Jones here. I fully expect Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, and Josh Jacobs to be off the board by our next pick. And we are most likely, and yes, we are going to go with Tyree Kill here at the 203. Now, the reason I think that this is a decent way to go 0 RB is we are going to have to start 3 wide receivers here, and you only need to start 2 running backs, and you have a flex spot. So when you have this setup and you are able to start 4 stud wide receivers, it is actually going to give you an advantage over your competition as long as you can find and scrape together RB2 production for your 2 running back spots. You are going to have an advantage at every other starting roster spot over your competition, and that is what we are looking for. When you draft a 0 running back team, you are going to have to put in the work. You are going to have to go out there and find the guys at the end of your draft that have the potential to become starting running backs with one injury or another. But great news for 0 RB drafters. There is a thing called COVID-19, which is going to cause a lot of turmoil in the NFL. This is going to be a crazy NFL season with a ton of starters being out week to week. And I know COVID is going to impact the wide receivers just as much as the running backs. But what is different in fantasy football with running backs versus wide receivers is the running back position is replaceable at the NFL level, where if a guy like Derrick Henry goes down, you're actually going to be able to go out there and you're going to be able to start Darrington Evans, whereas if a guy like DeAndre Hopkins goes down, you're not going to be able to go out there and start Andy Isabella. So that is the entire thesis around 0 RB, is those backup running backs can actually produce fantasy points, because the running back position in fantasy points is largely driven by the fact that you can go out there and find that production at the backup running back positions, where you cannot find that at the wide receiver position. They cannot bring you top tier production. For instance, if Ezekiel Elliott goes down in 2020, whenever we are looking at Tony Pollard, he's going to project as an RB1, but you're never going to find that with a wide receiver. Now, following the draft, we see Travis Kelsey go at the 201 and George Kittle go at the 211. Both of these tight ends I feel are a little early to take in a non-tight end premium league. I love both of them, especially George Kittle in Dynasty, but when it's just 1 point per reception for the tight end position, I still think I would rather lean wide receiver here like we see GOAT ballers do with the Kenny Golladay. And this is a very, very simple start that I've seen a lot of people do with the first overall pick. I've seen them mainly go with a Christian McCaffrey there at 1, but follow it up with a wide receiver and Lamar Jackson at the 2-3 turn, which I think gives you a great upside play just because you're going to be able to go out there and start a top 5 quarterback, wide receiver, and running back. We see Mike Evans followed up at the 302. If you watched yesterday's video, I actually stacked together Kenny Golladay and Mike Evans at that 2-3 turn when I had the first overall pick. None of these other picks are really standing out to me too much at the moment. I believe that it's all really standard except Patrick Mahomes at the 208. And I know that if y'all are casual fantasy football players, you may be used to seeing quarterbacks go a lot earlier than this, but I'm telling you all right now, that is not something that you want to be doing. You want to be waiting on quarterback. And Lamar Jackson at the 212, I feel that's the earliest you can go out there and take them. I think it's completely fine, but I really prefer to see those two quarterbacks go off the board in the 3rd round instead of the 2nd round. Yet if you play in a casual fantasy football league, if you just play in an office league, a lot of the times you are going to be seeing them go at the very top end of your draft. And I highly recommend just going out there and doing some research, and you will find out that there are a million reasons why that is a horrible idea to go out there and build your team around. So we've been seeing a wide receiver run go. We've seen a couple auto picks. That was actually a Q pick, not an auto pick, but the Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin were both auto picks. So hopefully we don't see any more of those. And when we're building this 0 RB team, what we want to be seeing is we want to see guys go out there and take the dead zone of running backs. We want people to go out there and spend premium picks on a guy like Todd Gurley, David Johnson, Chris Carson, and we want the guys like Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, and Calvin Ridley to fall to us in the 3rd and 4th round. And then we are going to have stud wide receivers at every single starting position for us, and we are actually going to continue hammering in the wide receiver position to get through injuries and bye weeks, and we are going to allocate a ton of our roster spots for high-end backup running backs that if anything happens ahead of them, they can go out there and they can produce. Now we are on the clock. Very simple pick for me. I'm going to go with Amari Cooper here. I know a lot of people would go with James Conner, but I like the start that we're getting. I like that there are a couple other teams that went extremely heavy running back, so now they are going to have to follow up and they're going to have to hit the wide receiver position in 4 and 5. And what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping here at the 4th round pick, I'm going to get a guy like Calvin Ridley or Cooper Kupp. Preferably, actually, we are going to go over to the tight end position with Mark Andrews. I would kind of be surprised if we see him go here with one of these next 2 picks, but at the 402, he's a real possibility. We see James Conner go off the board. That's a great thing. We weren't necessarily looking at him in this range. Mark Andrews goes off the board, and that is crap. That is our first snipe of the day, but nonetheless, we still have Cooper Kupp and A.J. Brown. I may actually lean A.J. Brown here over Cooper Kupp just because I already have the stability with all these other wide receivers. So here we are. We're going to go with A.J. Brown for our wide receiver 4. I could not be more happy about our start. Now we're going to see a ton of other teams other than Straw Hat have to catch up and start taking all of these wide receivers, and there's still a ton of good ones on the board, but we are just trying to zig when other players zag. Leonard Fournette, that's another player we love seeing go off the board. We want those running backs that project to have a lot of volume but not necessarily be efficient with that volume to start going off the board now. In the 5th round, who my target actually is going to be Kareem Hunt, because he has the floor due to his pass catching ability that you really look when you don't have a steady running back that you want to build around, because I'm going to be able to plug him in at least as an RB2 from weeks 1 on. And if anything happens to Nick Chubb, we are actually going to have a top 5 running back. And if we have a top 5 running back with Julio Jones, Tyree Kill, Amari Cooper, and A.J. Brown, it's going to be extremely, extremely hard to stop this team. And that's the entire thesis around Zero RB. We kind of acknowledge that to win a fantasy football league, you are at odds. It's extremely unlikely for you to go out there and win your league. I did the math, and it's about 7.5% of a chance that you go out there and you get first place in your fantasy football league. So what we want to do is we want to take very high upside shots on running backs that could end up getting that really top end range of outcomes, like a Cam Akers that we see just go off the board. If we also see a DeAndre Swift fall to us in the 5th round, we are going to love that. We see Terry McLaurin at the 502. That is great value. But what we want to be avoiding here is we want to be avoiding the guys that don't have a high ceiling, but some people want to believe they have a high floor due to how easy it is to project volume, even though a lot of that volume may not come to real life, such as a Le'Veon Bell, a David Montgomery, a Devin Singletary, and a Raheem Mostert. Those are the guys we are trying to avoid, and we are trying to get the guys like Kareem Hunt, Ronald Jones, DeAndre Swift, and J.K. Dobbins. All of those guys have a ton of upside, and they are definitely going to be in the range here in our 5th round. If we look at the wide receiver position, the best available are guys like Courtland Sutton, Marquise Brown, Stefan Diggs, and Devontae Parker. I'm kind of completely out on T.Y. Hilton at this point. I think even if he can stay healthy, he's not going to mesh well with Phillip Rivers. So that's a guy that I have no interest in despite how far he falls. Now that one hurts. We see Kareem Hunt go off the board. Now that was a fantastic pick by Dirty Dollar Bill. I mean, we're seeing that Kareem Hunt goes off the board for 5 other running backs that were ahead of him in ADP. Just an extremely sharp pick. What we may actually end up doing here at our 5th round pick is taking a wide receiver. And I know that's crazy, but the logic behind it is if we look at the 2 guys behind us, we can be confident that they are most likely going to look at the wide receiver position before the running back position, and we are just trying to get one of DeAndre Swift or J.K. Dobbins here. Now that we see Ronald Jones, David Montgomery go off the board, we are a little more concerned about our probability of getting DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins, but we're just going to have to see what falls to us. And at the quarterback position and the tight end position, we are just going to wait till the very end of the draft. We are going to continue to hammer in these wide receivers and running backs. But now we are 1 pick away, and let's see who he decides to take. DeAndre Swift, now that was our guy. Now I feel we have to actually go out there and draft a running back now. J.K. Dobbins is maybe seen as a little bit of a reach. Let me see who the wide receivers are. Marquise Brown is staring at me in the face. It's hard to pass him up. I know y'all are screaming, but trust me. Just trust me on this. We'll look at the team afterwards. I think I'm going to have to go with Marquise Brown just out of these players. And yeah, we're going to push the button. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how far we can push this. This is a mock draft. We are going to see what this comes up with. So what we are hoping here is we are just begging that J.K. Dobbins is going to fall to us, because similar to Kareem Hunt, it is a probability that J.K. Dobbins ends up being a top 5 running back in fantasy down the stretch. And if we are rolling into teams with 4 wide receiver ones, it's going to be hard to beat us if we have any running back production, and that's what we are banking on. So we see Devontae Parker and Dak Prescott go off the board. That is fantastic for us. Clanks has yet to take a wide receiver, so here he goes Michael Gallup. We are 1 pick away from getting our running back in J.K. Dobbins. This looks like it worked out perfectly for us. Just please don't take our guy here. Come on, go to the wide receiver position. There we go. We see Tyler Boyd go off the board, and we get our potential running back 1. We are starting off with Julio Jones, Tyree Kill, Amari Cooper, A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown, and J.K. Dobbins. I'm extremely, extremely excited about this start. Now what we have to do is we are probably only going to take 1 more wide receiver. We're going to stop at 6 wide receivers, or maybe we can even stop at 5 depending on where the value falls. And we are just going to hammer home a ton of running backs to try to catch up, and we are just going to play them week to week depending on whoever is projecting to have volume. We see another auto pick here. I believe this was the 3rd auto pick at the of the draft at the 604. Le'Veon Bell going off the board, but that is not too bad of an auto pick just because we know that Le'Veon would be going off in this range anyway, so it does not really mess up the draft at all. Now we see Stefan Diggs going off the board here at the 605. Someone actually logged out of the draft here at the 106, so hopefully Sleeper does not just go extremely off board here and doesn't just take random players. Hopefully they stick to an ADP list, which they do with Darren Waller, who is the next best available tight end, and this team has yet to have a tight end, so glad to see that the draft is still running smoothly. But getting back to it, at the 605, I love the pick with Stefan Diggs, but I do not like the Brandon Cooks pick at the 606. I think I would much rather go with Will Fuller over Brandon Cooks for a multitude of reasons, mainly because he is the player who's played with Deshaun Watson the longest. Now we see Raheem Mostert go off the board as well as T.Y. Hilton. All of these are players that we were not really interested in with our 7th round pick, so this is great news for us. And what we are hoping here is we are just hoping that we are going to see a couple quarterbacks go off the board, a couple running backs that we are not too interested in. Devin Singletary would have been nice to get back to us just because of our build, but nonetheless, we are continue to move on. Now we see Russell Wilson go off the board at the 6th pick. I don't necessarily like the Russell Wilson pick just because you don't have any stack potential without a DK Metcalf or a Tyler Lockett, but I completely understand Russell Wilson was a good value at that point. Now we see Deontay Johnson go off the board at the 612, Rob Gronkowski go off the board at the 701. And here we are just continuing. See, this is why we hammered in so many wide receivers at being in the draft. Now, if you look at this draft board, a lot of it is blue, and that's because a lot of teams did not have wide receivers to start. So now they're catching up, and they're going to start that wide receiver run. And I'm sad to say, but if Will Fuller actually makes it back to us here in the 7th, we may have to push the button and just commit to that being our last wide receiver we take in the draft. There are still some intriguing tight ends to be had, but there are so many of them, I would rather just wait until the end of the draft to get one and continue hammering in running backs and wide receivers. And trust me, wait till you see the end result. It is going to be nice. I am not worried about it. We see James White get auto-picked at the 706. He was the best available running back. We see Hayden Hurst go off at the 705. We continue to see these tight ends, and I hope that we actually see more tight ends go off the board before we get to our pick. By far, the best player available on this board is Will Fuller. I would love to have him as my wide receiver 6 and then never have to worry about the wide receiver position and consistently hammer in and beat teams down with my combination of wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s. And then we just have to backfill with running back production. AJ Green at the 707, Deebo Samuel at the 708. Like I said before, I cannot get behind the fact of taking these guys ahead of Will Fuller. I can't believe that Will Fuller is still available at the 710. He is a wide receiver 1 every single time he is on the field with Deshaun Watson, and that is something that you want, especially in a team where Will Fuller is not even projecting to be in your starting lineup. So if Will Fuller is out for the year, it does not even affect me too badly just because I was not really relying on him. Julian Edelman goes with the pick before. So we are going to press the button here with Will Fuller, especially considering that the pick after us is most likely not going to go with wide receiver because he already has 4. But we are going to go Will Fuller. We are already done with the wide receiver position after the 7th round. Now we are going to strictly pivot to running backs. We are going to target Antonio Gibson with this next pick, because Antonio Gibson is a guy that has league-winning potential, and then we are going to backfill with, oh crap, Antonio Gibson just went. That hurt to see, but you have to respect it. I think that was a fantastic pick. Now is the time to backfill with guys that I think that we can start in week 1. Jordan Howard's off the board. I think we are going to go with a Tariq Cohen here, especially after the David Montgomery injury. Tariq Cohen is an auto start week 1. Maybe he has appeal down the line if he can turn those receptions into efficient points. And we are going to go with Tariq Cohen, lock it in, our second running back in the 8th round. And now we are going to continue to slam the running back position. We have a bunch of intriguing guys here that are all a injury away, such as Latavius Murray, Alexander Madison, Kareem Johnson and Damien Harris can both have immediate value, but there are just a ton of guys here that I am intrigued with. And the beauty with these running backs is you know exactly when to start them. You know when they are going to get opportunity, if the starter ahead of them is injured, if we see a holdout of any kind, and this is what we are looking for. We know when to start our stud wide receivers because they are going to produce every single week, and we are going to know when to start one of our 8 running backs because they are going to have the opportunity and the matchup. Alexander Madison, one of our running back targets, goes off the board at the 805. That does hurt to see. We see the team after us get great value on Evan Ingram at the 804. Marlon Mack at the 806. I'm not too concerned about Marlon Mack. McCole Hardman, 808. I mean, Zach Moss, 809. Zach Moss was one of our targets. I think that he would have been a great fit for this team because he did have the upside down the stretch, and also he did have immediate playability, splitting a backfield with Devin Singletary. Now we see Moneyballer up with the 810. Hopefully he avoids the Tevin Coleman, Phillip Lindsay, Latavius Murray, Kareem Johnson tier. Hopefully we continue to see people go with these wide receivers. But if you look at the wide receivers, I mean, they are pretty depleted outside of Christian Kirk. I am not trying to load up on a ton of rookie wide receivers. If we go to the tight end position, there are still a ton of guys that I am comfortable with. I'm comfortable going all the way down to Chris Herndon, and a ton of people already have their tight ends, so I don't think that we have to be too concerned about them flying off the board as late. Now we see a couple more running backs go off the board, and that obviously hurts our team when we're looking for these guys late. Christian Kirk, 901, fantastic value. If you are drafting on Sleeper, this ADP is extremely inefficient just because a lot of people who draft on Sleeper are just casual fantasy football players. They are just playing in an office league. They are probably middle school kids just excited to play. They don't really know what they're doing, and so you're going to be able to scroll down and actually find great picks, whereas if you played on a high stakes fantasy football platform, you are going to see very efficient ADP. The San Francisco 49ers at the 902. I'm sorry, I cannot get behind ever taking a defense that early. I don't care about the settings. I don't care about your previous picks. I just can't agree with that. Now, the 903, let's see. Let's pray that it's not a running back. We see Jamison Crowder go off the board. Another great pick for us. Damien Harris, 904. That really hurts by Paz. I mean, Paz is obviously going out there killing us pick after pick. He's an extremely smart guy. Dirty dollar bill. Let's see what he does. Jalen Reagor, 905. Great pick. Tyler Higbee, 906. We're still looking at a couple of these great running backs. I'm really hoping that we get Tevin Coleman coming back to us because everyone always says, oh, I hate drafting the San Francisco 49er running back because you never know which one is going to be their starter. And yeah, if I'm going to get a discount on Tevin Coleman, potentially the starting running back for the most friendly rushing offense in the entire NFL in the 9th round, that is going to be extremely exciting. The 907, hopefully we don't see a timeout. I think we are going to. Yep, we saw a timeout. Matt Ryan, was that team's first quarterback? Perfect. That was that team's first quarterback, so the draft is completely fine, not out of the ordinary whatsoever. 908, Josh Allen. Let's see what quarterbacks are still available. We see Carson Wentz is definitely the best quarterback available at this point. I know some people really want to say it's Tom Brady, but I promise you it's not. If you look at high-stakes drafters, Carson Wentz is going ahead of Tom Brady, and Sleeper, like I said before, people really are casuals on here, and that ADP is just incorrect where it should be. Tom Brady goes before Carson Wentz, like I was just saying. Let's look at the teams after us to see if they have a quarterback. One of them does, so we know that we don't have to be worried about a quarterback going there. JRYP could technically take a quarterback, but I am not too worried about Carson Wentz going, especially with the other options available. So I'm going to go take Tevin Coleman and be extremely happy about it. Hopefully we get a Chase Edmonds coming back for us. Yes, we do see Carson Wentz go off the board right after we take Tevin Coleman. But like I said before, now that every team has a quarterback, not many are going to be doubling up. And even if they do, the quarterback position is extremely, extremely deep this year. So I am not too concerned. We still have a ton of running back potential down there on the draft board that I'm going to love to soak up. Chase Edmonds at the 1001, Latavius Murray at the 912. Those are picks that I hate to see because those are two of our strong targets. Now, we still have Phillip Lindsay, we still have Sony Michel, and those are going to be our main choices right now. We're going to take Phillip Lindsay in the 10th round and see This is the entire thesis around this draft. Yes, we have to start 2 running backs, and yes, none of our running backs look like great options right now, but all we have to do is get lucky with 2 of them. It doesn't matter if 5 of them end up being bust. That is besides the point, because they're not going to touch our starting lineup anyway, because every flex spot is going to be filled with a wide receiver for us, and we are going to be working the waiver wire for these running backs. So now we are going to wait to see what is up. And we see another timeout. Aaron Rodgers goes here. I hate to see that timeout just because I think that does mess up the draft a little bit, because I don't think we would have seen Aaron Rodgers go to a team that already has Tom Brady. Hopefully we don't see another timeout here from Joey D, and we will try to determine if that was a decent enough pick to move the draft along. Let me see where I believe the draft would go, and I don't think he has a tight end, so I think that this pick 10 times out of 10 is Hunter Henry or Jared Cook. Hopefully Sleeper decides the same, and we will see. Sleeper took Jared Cook. That is perfect for the draft. Now, Dirty Dollar Bill. I really, really hate to see timeouts. I mean, okay, good. Dirty Dollar Bill is back on. We are not going to see a timeout for this pick. But bad news, we see A.J. Dillon, one of our running back targets for this next round. Like I said earlier, we are just going to continue hammering in these running backs. We just need to find production, and we need to scrape it together. I don't care if I have 2 different starting running backs every single week. As long as they're producing as RB2s, we are going to smash teams with the combination of Julio Jones, Tyree Kill, Amari Cooper, A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown, and Will Fuller. We see Hunter Henry go off the board, then Sony Michel. I was kind of hoping Sony Michel was going to make it back to us. Now we have to pray that we see Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is our guy in the 11th round, because if Tony Pollard comes back to us, Ezekiel Elliott gets injured, we have a running back 1 on our hands, and that is something that we are going to be able to take to the championship, and I can guarantee you that with the strength of our wide receivers. And I know some people may be worried saying we need a quarterback, but we understand that Daniel Jones, Cam Newton, Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, they all have great upside. Tony Pollard goes off at the 11:04. Paz is just absolutely killing us with these running back targets. Dirty Dollar Bill, please don't time out. Let's see a real selection here. At the wide receivers, the best pick available is probably going to be a Brandon Ayuk or a Sterling Shepard. Maybe you can argue a Preston Williams. At the tight end position, we still have Austin Hooper, TJ Hawkinson, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Chris Herndon. I'm fine with any of those guys. So we see Darrell Henderson go off the board, and that hurts us with that timeout because Darrell Henderson was one of our targets. Now we are going to be looking at either Keyshawn Vaughn or Duke Johnson with our next pick, and we are going to get a tight end coming back the other way unless we see a tight end run happen between our next pick. I think that we are going to continue to push the position off another round, and we just have to make sure that we start picking our quarterbacks and tight ends starting in the 13th round, because we need to go quarterback, tight end, kicker, defense, and then we're going to take a high upside guy at the very end of the draft, because I'm almost certain we are going to have to end up cutting someone for waiver wires after week 1, because we don't know how to project depth charts this year without preseason to be extremely accurate. So Justin Jefferson, then Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson was one of our targets. Now we just have to hope that we see Keyshawn Vaughn. This guy timed out last time. Hopefully we don't see the same thing happen this time. Sleeper says that he's in the draft room. Hopefully he is able to make his selection. We will see. And hopefully it is not Keyshawn Vaughn, because Keyshawn Vaughn is a guy that I believe has the upside, and maybe he can get that third down work in Tampa Bay and be an immediate player. And yes, we see Sterling Shepard go, and now we are able to go on, take Keyshawn Vaughn, I believe our 5th running back, and keep in mind we're only going to need to start 2, and we're just going to play week to week to determine who that is. Maybe we try to go with another running back before going to the tight end position. Let's see, there are a couple options that I'm still interested in, and I think will be around another round. So we're going to go with our tight end. I think the best available tight end is going to be either TJ Hawkinson or Austin Hooper. It's really going to be up to us with who to take. And this is why I decided to wait on tight end this far, because these are still fantastic tight ends that are going to be available to us. And that's why we have hammered home the running back and wide receiver position, because we've seen that position dry up. See Mike Gesicki go off the board. Now that definitely means we are taking a tight end. I think I'm going to lean TJ Hawkinson, just because Austin Hooper scares me a little bit with David Njoku still in town. If Austin Hooper makes it back to us in the 13th, maybe we double dip with tight end or a Jonnu Smith. But now we have to pray that we see some more wide receivers go off the draft board, because we are completely out on wide receivers at this point. Not interested at all. As I said, we were done taking wide receivers after we took Will Fuller in the 7th round. And if you would like to see our team, here it is down here. And yes, keep in mind, these starting running backs don't look too appealing, but they are going to be changing every week, and we are just going to be playing matchups. We are going to be playing who has the projected opportunity. So it's going to change week to week, but our wide receiver positions are going to just completely smash teams. A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, Tyree Kill, Julio Jones. Try to keep up if you are just getting mediocre wide receiver and mediocre running back production, because you are going to be able to find average running back production on the waiver wire, and if you load up your bench with a ton of running backs, as we have with Tevin Coleman, Phillip Lindsay, and Keyshawn Vaughn. We also have Marquise Brown and Will Fuller on our bench in case we have to go through bye weeks. We still want those top-end wide receivers available to us to plug in and continue to get that wide receiver to production, and we're going to be able to beat our opponents down with that. Now, Dirty Dollar Bill, it looks like some people have logged out of the draft. We are going to keep on going. Maybe I'll end the draft 2 rounds early so we don't have to see the kicker and defense, but we are still going to get through maybe another running back, maybe another tight end, and a quarterback we still need. Now, if we go to the quarterback, let's look at who we're going to be choosing between. Cam Newton does have the rushing upside that we love to see in fantasy football. He is playing with Bill Belichick. I think that he's going to be my number 1 quarterback option on this board. But if he is gone, I think we're going to have to go with Jared Goff, who actually led the NFL in passing attempts last season. Nobody really talks about that. Nobody really knows that, just because the team was really inefficient. But a thing about fantasy football is volume sticks more than efficiency does year to year. So if you chase volume, you tend to have a better bet rather than chasing efficiency. We see some more wide receivers go off the board here, which we love to see with Brandon Ayuk, Golden Tate, N'Keal Harry. Hopefully we see some more wide receivers go. Let's try to go up and let's try to identify some of our favorite teams. Please leave in the comments what teams that you like. Right away, a team sticking out to me is Moneyballer. I think that he has a very balanced team with running back and wide receiver production everywhere. He really hammered it home. I really don't like the Joey D team, just because I don't really see where the upside comes from. I think he's a team that has an extremely high floor with his projected volume from his running backs, but I don't think that it really exceeds that. Dan in real life went running back early and he went running back often, but I think it worked out for him fantastically because he took running backs that do have extremely high ceilings and switched over to the wide receiver position early enough to where he still got some studs. He got Alexander Madison in the 8th, which was one of our targets, with a guy that has an extremely high ceiling. He has Josh Allen, a rushing quarterback, which we love to see. Duke Johnson, Austin Hooper. That was a fantastic team. He did a great job waiting on tight end to get Austin Hooper there. We see JRYP also having a great team. He took 2 stud 3-down running backs in the 1st and 2nd rounds. Then he followed it up with a ton of great wide receivers. Took another upside running back with Antonio Gibson, another upside wide receiver. Came back just in time to get his quarterback and tight end. He followed it up with another upside wide receiver and tight end. Now we see our guy Cam Newton going off the board, as well as Baker Mayfield. I think that because of every team having, it looks like, 1 to 2 quarterbacks at this point, I'm not going to push the button on Jared Goff until we come back. Actually, both teams behind us only have 1 quarterback, and they know I am looking at quarterback. So I think Jared Goff is going to be our pick here at the 13th round. And this is why we waited on quarterback. We wanted to see this value fall to us, which it did. DeAndre Washington in the 13th, also a great pick. I would have taken him in the 14th if he made it back to us. But now we are just sweating this pick, hoping that he does not go with Jared Goff. But I think this may be a timeout pick. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully we see who his actual pick would have been. But nonetheless, we are going to have an option at Jared Goff. Either way, I feel like, yes, he goes with the defense, so we are going to take Jared Goff. And I think that's a fantastic value as our quarterback 1 in the 13th round. As I said, he led the NFL in attempts last year. Now, if we can actually get the New England Patriots to fall back to us, maybe that is something we consider. If not, I think Jerick McKinnon would also be in consideration for this pick, as well as Darrington Evans. There are still a ton of upside running backs that are just an injury away, and this is why we loaded up on those wide receivers early on, because we thought that we would be able to find these guys. And I actually thought that we were later on in the draft. We still have 4 picks, so I'm going to be able to get another running back and possibly another tight end. So we still have a ton of running backs to choose from. Let's look at the tight end position, where there are 4 guys. So the question is, do we bet on the 4 guys coming back to us after all these picks, or do we bet on a running back we like coming back to us? And I think that we are going to bet on the tight end, just because if we look across the draft board, Team 1 only has 1 tight end, but Team 2 has 2, Team 3 has 1, Team 4 has 1. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think we may go tight end just to lock in Jonnu Smith or Chris Herndon. It's really up in the air which guy you prefer. I think that I'm going to go with Chris Herndon just because the hype that he's been getting lately in the high-end fantasy football, high-stakes community. And if he's climbing up their draft boards, we should be looking at him as well. So Chris Herndon is my tight end too. I don't necessarily prefer to stream tight ends as I do with quarterbacks. I think streaming quarterbacks is a lot easier than tight ends, because with tight ends, you end up just trying to project who is going to score the random touchdown week to week. We're going to see another timeout here. Really sad, guys. If you join one of these mocks, please stick it out to the end. We hate seeing these timeouts. I mean, that really just kills the flow of the draft, and it kills the legitimacy of the draft. Now, see Curtis Samuel go in the 14th. Good pick. I like Curtis Samuel a lot in Dynasty. Now, I think this is going to be another timeout, so we're just going to have to sit here, see who it is. But after this, I think we're going to make our 15th round pick, then possibly log out. Most people are just going to be going out and taking their quarterbacks and defenses. If I am giving away a little defensive strategy, I would highly recommend going with the Indianapolis Colts, because if you look at their early season schedule, they start with Jacksonville, which should be the worst offense in the NFL in 2020, and then afterwards they still have a ton of easy games to play until I believe week 6, so you can ride them out for 6 weeks without having to worry about streaming the position. Now we're going to see Dirty Dollar Bill timeout as well, I'm afraid, but after that we should see these guys just go smoothly. Yep, so we are in just the kicker range. Everyone's going to be taking kickers, and we see another kicker go off the board. But we are going to be looking at the running back position, trying to get one more guy that we like. I do really like Benny Snell. I like Joshua Kelly. I like Darrington Evans. So it's going to be down between those 3 guys for us. Really, just whoever they leave us, I'd imagine some teams do decide to go running back here on out. Go Ballers is just absolutely killing it with all these late round running back targets, such as Justin Jackson and Darrington Evans. We see Ryan Tannehill go to the second team. Larry Fitzgerald, Bryan Edwards. Bryan Edwards is a guy that's been skyrocketing up redraft boards, and this is actually a great value compared to where he goes in a lot of high-stakes drafts. If you can get him in your casual fantasy football league at this point, I would recommend it, but in high-stakes drafts where he's going, I don't think he's worth the price, just because I understand you may want to argue that he's a great talent, but Darren Waller is going to be getting receptions. Henry Ruggs is going to be getting receptions. They've brought in about 5 satellite backs into that offense, and at the same time, they still have Hunter Renfrow, and they're going to try to rush the ball a ton with Josh Jacobs. so I don't really understand the upside with Bryan Edwards. Benny Snell goes off the board. Now we're just kind of hoping Joshua Kelly falls in our lap with the 15.10, but before then, I mean, there's not really any other intriguing running backs at the top of the board that someone may take. If Joshua Kelly is not there, I'm going to go with the Daryl Williams, who's been going ahead of DeAndre Washington in Kansas City Chiefs practices lately. And that's a guy that if you can try to get any piece of that Kansas City Chiefs offense, it's going to be a great bet. Hunter Renfrow with the 15.8. We are one pick away from either our Joshua Kelly or Daryl Williams. Hopefully we end up with Joshua Kelly. And by the way, this is what I was talking about with sleepers ADP just being complete garbage. Lesean Mccoy is not a draftable player. He will be cut before the season starts. He was brought in because Keyshawn Vaughn was on the COVID list. He was brought in for practices, yet he's still here. I mean, he's higher than legitimate guys like Joshua Kelly. We see Mike Williams, who has an injury, get timed out and put onto the team before us. So we're going to go with Joshua Kelly with our 15th round pick. And we only have 2 more rounds. I am going to stick it out just so y'all can get a sense of the draft board. But I'm not going to be able to provide that much commentary just because I think that we are going to mainly see a lot of defenses and kickers coming off the board. And I'm not an expert by any means on defenses and kickers. Lesean Mccoy goes off the board. That was a timeout. You're not going to see that in any real fantasy football league. If you do, just thank God because someone wasted a pick. Anthony McFarland Jr. goes off the board. Now, that was actually a great pick. Now we have to go out there and we have to pick a kicker and defense. Let's go. And Tampa Bay is still actually available, and Tampa Bay projects to have a fantastic defense this season, especially with Tom Brady limiting the interceptions and putting the team in bad situations, such as Jameis Winston did in 2019. So in 2020, Tampa Bay is actually a premium defense. I was extremely surprised to see them fall this far. How many defenses have been selected before them? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Tampa Bay was the 8th defense off the board. Usually I wait until the very last round and get a defense like the Indianapolis Colts, but Tampa Bay, great pick there. Robbie Gould is a timeout. Like I said, I don't really have any kicker takes. I'm going to just take the best kicker available to me at the 17.11. Lyndon Bowden Jr. is actually a guy I took in the last draft. I think that he's an extremely interesting player, especially in the FFPC, where he's actually designated as a running back or a wide receiver. You can play him at either spot, and a lot of people are going to ignore that flexibility that gives you, but it's actually something that is extremely valuable in terms of starting your lineup through bye weeks and injuries. If Lyndon Bowden Jr. ever becomes a thing, having him on your roster is going to be a difference maker that I'm all for. Now we see a timeout. Alshon Jeffrey, he's not going to go in any of your fantasy drafts. He's going to start on the PUP list. You do not want him on your team. Carlos Hyde is off the board with the 16th pick. I mean, that's a decent pick. Carlos Hyde could fall into some touches in Seattle, but Chris Carson looks to be healthier than we initially projected. And I'm probably just going to end the video here, guys. I don't want to make y'all sit through these timeouts. I'm very disappointed that the draft ended like this, but nonetheless, the beginning of the draft was extremely useful. Hopefully, we get a better group in here the next time where we're not timing out near the end as much. But yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for watching the video all the way through. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you drop a like. Please make sure you subscribe, and have a great day, guys.